all of you for joining us. We're just going to wait a short moment to give all of you a chance to actually come on this call. There's a lot of you waiting in the waiting room, so we're just going to be starting in 1 second. Hi, thank you to all of you who are joining us live on this webinar, whether you're joining via Zoom or one of our live links on YouTube or Facebook. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm Rabbi Leah Mühlstein. I'm the chair of the European Union for Progressive Judaism and immediate past chair of Artzenu. Thank you for joining this update brought to you by the Worldwide Reform Movement, the Union for Reform Judaism, URJ, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, CCAR, ARTSA, Artzenu, the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, the World Union for Progressive Judaism and its regions, and of course, most importantly, our Israeli movement, the Israel Movement for Reform and Progressive Judaism, IMPJ, and the Israel Religious Action Center. I have the privilege of guiding us through the next 90 minutes. To make sure that we can maximize the time to listen to our speakers, I will introduce all speakers only very briefly, but we will share fuller bios in the chat. We will hear today from Anna Kislansky, CEO of the IMPJ, followed by Rabbi Yael Vogan, the rabbi of our Sha'ar HaNegev congregation, which includes many of the kibbutzim that were most heavily affected by the fighting. Then we will turn to the diplomatic correspondent for the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, Amir Tibon, who will share his personal story of survival and rescue. Yair Lutzstein, the chair of the IMPJ, will share his reflections on the general atmosphere in Israel. We will hear from Yaron Shavit, the vice chair of the Jewish Agency for Israel, before handing over to Rabbi Rick Jacobs, president of the URJ, to share his perspective from North America. We will then take some time for questions, which you can submit using the Q&A feature of this webinar, before concluding with Rabbi Hara Person, the chief executive of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, leading us in a prayer for peace. But first in our lineup, let me hand over to Shana Dweck and Harry Levy, the co-chairs of Artzenu.
Thank you, Leah. I am Shoshana Dweck. Together with Harry Levy, we are the co-chairs of Artzenu, the political voice of reform, progressive, and liberal Zionists around the world. By being here together as the leaders and members of our congregations, organizations, and communities, we strengthen our bond with each other around the world, and together we express our solidarity and love for our siblings, our family in Israel. We stand with you always. We are grateful to our Israeli partners in the IMPJ and Iraq who are helping us, spread as we are around the world, stay connected and informed, including with this webinar, even while you are leading and supporting your teams and congregations and caring for yourselves and your loved ones under impossible circumstances. Toda rabba lachem. I do not believe that Jewish history is the never-ending cycle of this pain and war. I have tikva. I have hope that it is a spiral reaching ever upward. Our job is to keep it moving toward a better future, toward peace. Today, we do that by coming together in strength as a community and doing all we can as individuals. Even as we support each other and stand up for Israel together, the link is in the chat for you to give financially to our joint campaign individually.
Thank you, Shoshana. 50 years ago, I was a 16-year-old with a newly minted driver's license. And I do vividly remember the Yom Kippur War when it happened. And it was a visceral event for me. I was worried about the long-term survival of Israel as a Jewish state. This was an attack from nation states outside of Israel. But it was still a separate event. It was elsewhere. It wasn't where I lived. This time, while I am hopeful that this is not a situation where Israel is in peril of losing its identity, it hits so much closer to home. There are people I know who have relatives that were kidnapped. There are people I know who are in the military and are and have been called up. There are people I know who live in Tel Aviv and are worried and for their very safety. This is a different situation this time, and it hits us all very close to home. And I'm hopeful that this call, this service, this time together will bring us together and help us have some clarity for ourselves. Rabbi, back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Shoshana. Thank you, Harry. Anna, over to you.
Dear friends, shalom. For the past few days, I found it difficult to say the words good evening or good morning or good afternoon, but I refuse to remove the word shalom, peace in Hebrew, from my vocabulary. I continue to hope, wish and pray for peace upon Israel. The Homefront Command has just publicized instructions to all citizens of Israel that they should prepare equipment and supplies for staying up to 72 hours in safe rooms and shelters, including specific instructions regarding food, water, lighting equipment, and batteries for electricity and other instructions. So I reckon we have a lot of time together. But not joking. In 2009, leading up to another operation to protect the residents of the South, Operation Cast Lead, the poet and songwriter Ariel Horowitz, son of Naomi Shemer, wrote the poem, Kmo Rakafot Ben Aslaim, like cyclamen between the rocks. The poem was written just moments before Ariel was about to travel from Tel Aviv to Gaza periphery to perform for soldiers and civilians. Amid what is usually read in the newspaper, the poem said, like cyclamen between rocks, hides the beautiful face of the land. And when suddenly she needs someone to line the mud in a trench, you won't believe how they appear, like cyclamen between rocks. וכשהיא לפתע צריכה שמישהו ישכב בבוץ בתוך שוחה, לא תאמין איך הם מופיעים, כמו רקפות בין הסלעים. Cyclamen or rakafot are among the most well-known and beloved wildflowers in Israel, blooming unexpectedly every winter amidst hard and barren rocks. Similarly, in our state of Israel, when it suddenly needs us, the citizens, soldiers, combatants, and you, our dear friends in the diaspora, emerge akin to cyclamen appearing between the rocks. With that, I would also like to tell you a bit about our congregations and the flowers within them sprouting between the rocks, the hope, efforts, and dedication of our movement, rooted in Zionism and patriotism, and of the leadership and spiritual support that are occurring during these challenging days. On Saturday, when Simchat Torah celebrations were canceled, Our communities gathered in virtual, online spaces for meeting of support, comfort, and supplication. The movement staff, in cooperation with Keren Bekavod, complied the list of hosting homes and accommodations. We are collaborating with communities from the Gaza envelope to connect people needing shelter with our friends from our communities. Keren Bekavod, which provides humanitarian assistance throughout the year, is adept at responding in times of emergency and is presently assessing the situation and working hard. We are enlisting volunteers from the congregations to drive equipment and provide assistance with transportations, particularly for distressed children from the southern region to safe places across the country. We are also arranging continued support through the spiritual guidance of rabbis and organizing educational and therapeutic activities in locations where evacuated families are staying. Given the disruption of the education system nationwide, with no access to online studies, we are conducting virtual educational activities for families of young children, offering an enriching experience for the children and providing relief for the parents. We will continue these efforts in the days to come. Unfortunately, following the instructions from the Council of Mechinot, a pre-military program for high school graduates, we had to send the trainees of our Mechina back to their homes until it becomes clear whether they can return to their spaces in Jaffa and Holon, which lack proper shelters. Fortunately, in Bait Bakila, our housing program for young adults with disabilities, there is a designated safe room, ensuring that the residents are in a secure environment. From the moment we received news about the extent of the disaster in the Gaza periphery, we have maintained contact with our friends at Congregation Sha'ar HaNegev through Rabbi Yael Vorgan. We are currently mobilizing resources to provide assistance to residents who are traumatized in various ways. I want to express my personal gratitude to all our friends from the diaspora for reaching out, for the numerous messages, so many messages you've sent to me and my family and to others in the IMPJ. Additionally, I want to assure you that if you have friends, family members, young people, or others who find themselves alone in the country amidst the chaos of war and need help, a listening ear, or a warm home, my home and the homes of our community members are open, and we will take care of them as if they were our own family. Together, we will navigate through these challenging times. Toda rabba.
Anna, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the important work that the IMPJ is doing. Thank you so much for these words of comfort for us, and also a little bit of hope that there is important work that is happening. And thank you for taking the time away from that important work to share it with us. We now turn to Rabbi Vorgan to hear from her. Thank you, Yael, for taking the time to be with us. Over to you.
Thank you. So in regular days, when I'm asked to describe my job, I always open by saying I'm the happiest rabbi on earth. I just love the area I work, Sha'ar HaNegev. I love the people I serve. I love the kind of work that I do. But today, I'm probably one of the saddest rabbis in the world. I work in Sha'ar HaNegev for the last 5 years. I work in 10 kibbutzim. 3 or 4 of them are really, really close to the fence. The rest are a little further. And you know, in our regular ceremonies, in Kabbalot Shabbat, in life cycle events, we are used to talk about grief and sorrow and memories and mourning, and also about comfort and hope. I already officiated spiritual resilience sessions from different kinds. after different rounds of rocket attacks. But this is something completely different. It's on a completely different scale. The amount of pain around us is so incredible that I feel like nothing could prepare me to know how to contain all this pain. And as you know, we are looking at hundreds of victims, but I first want to mention just one of them, the mayor of Sha'ar Negev, Ophir Liebstein from Kfar Aza. He was one of the first victims of this war. He was killed going out to protect his kibbutz. And some of you who visited Sha'ar Negev in the different tours may have met him, may have heard his vision, his incredible vision about building this huge industrial park in the Erez cross point for workers from Gaza Strip, for thousands of them. And he was a man of peace who died in war, and he was a very, very dear friend of IMPJ, of the world movement, and of our activity in Sha'ar Negev. He was such a big supporter. Everything we do, he came to speak with all the groups that we always bring. He came to a lot of our events to greet the people. It's a terrible, terrible loss. I don't want to start crying. So I'm going to move on to talking about the people of Sha'ar Negev, almost 10,000 residents in this region. I want to tell you, the people of Sha'ar Negev are so strong and are so brave and are so resilient. You will hear in a few moments one of them, Amir, and you will see for yourselves. These people always say that they live 95% of the time in heaven and 5% in hell. But I think this goes beyond the worst possible imagination. It's the worst nightmare coming to life. People in Sha'ar Negev handled like so many times of rocket attacks, but terrorists in their backyards and in their homes, it's the worst scenario. No one believed that can happen. I spent the last 3 days just sitting at my home. I live in Modi'in. I couldn't go down to the south. The roads are closed. So I made dozens of phone calls to people. You know, we have a very close circle of people who are more involved in the congregation, and a wider circle of people who come to the activities. I spoke to so many people sitting in the shelters for hours in the dark because there was no electricity and no food and water. People who don't know what is going on with their family members, people who just don't understand what's going on, people who already know of the deep people dead. It was just talking, just trying to understand what was going on. I felt like I had to be this huge sponge, just absorbing, just listening and absorbing all the information, really, really trying to understand, although I think we probably can't even start to imagine what the people were going through. And that's also a very, very hard place to be, where you're not there physically and just really trying to understand. Starting tomorrow, I will go start to go around Israel and visit the people that were evacuated from the kibbutzim, and mainly the ones that are in what they call the front line, the ones that are closest to the fence, and they're now scattered all over Israel in different guest houses and hotels. Talking to people all the time, I hear a lot of them saying that they don't know how they can ever be able to recover from this, but I'm sure they will. These are very firm people. I want to end with a verse, actually just 3 words out of a biblical verse that I kind of think a lot about. It comes to my mind a lot in the last few days. It's actually from the scroll of Esther, Megillat Esther, where the command to to destroy and kill all the Jews were sent out to the city of Shushan. It says these three words, V'ha'ir Shushan Navocha. The city of Shushan was embarrassed. And somehow, although it's so far, this story, but I feel this word helps me to understand what we're feeling. Va'ir Shushan Navocha, and the land of Israel, Navocha, is embarrassed. And it's not, the usual use of the word embarrass. It's not a social embarrassment. It's a very, very deep, profound, spiritual, emotional, moral embarrassment. We can't even understand how it's possible, the situation. How did we get to this situation? And mainly I feel that we don't know. Sometimes I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. The land of Israel, Navocha, embarrassed. And so the only thing I can really offer in my congregants is it's just to be there, to listen, to absorb, I can be a heart, I can be ears to listen, I can have hands to hug and hold their hands, and I can promise them that I will be there with them on the very, very long road to recovery, to rehabilitation, and to rebuilding their lives and their communities. So with this, I end and really, on one hand, embarrassed, and on the other hand, promise, really, really promise from the bottom of my heart, I'm there, not leaving.
Thank you so much. And we, of course, extend all our condolences to you, to your congregants. We share in your grief. Thank you for enabling us, even at this time of grief and deep concern, to hear your personal perspectives. And thank you so much also for all the sacred work that you are doing, Yael. So it's our privilege to turn now to Amir Tibon, who has graciously agreed to share his personal story with us. Amir, thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. My home has been destroyed on Saturday. Saturday, October 7, is the worst day in the history of the State of Israel. It's worse than the first day of the Yom Kippur War. It's worse than anything we knew during the Second Intifada. We lost on one day more than 700 people. This is almost, it's more than half of the casualties in the 5 years of the Second Intifada. It's more casualties than the first week of the 1973 war. I live in Kibbutz Nachal Oz, a beautiful community that is located directly on the border with Gaza. My wife and I moved there in 2014, immediately after the previous Gaza war, which looks like a small affair compared to what we are going through right now. But at the time, in 2014, the Nachal Oz and other communities along the border were dealing with a big crisis. If you recall, the 2014 war is when Hamas unleashed the weapon of tunnels that were dug into Israel. There was a history to these tunnels. Actually, they were already in use in the early years of the 2000s, but in 2014, Hamas used them in a massive way during the war to kill and abduct the bodies of Israeli soldiers. This rattled communities all over the world, all over the border, but as Rabbi Vorgan said, the communities are resilient. These are tough people. And yet there was a desire to bring more young families and couples to places like Nachal Oz and to create a sense of renewal and growth. And the two of us, as a young couple living in Tel Aviv at the time, decided to do it. 1 month after that war was over, we came to look for an apartment in Nachal Oz. People thought we were crazy. But we found out a beautiful and loving and hugging community, and we fell in love with the place. In 2016, we got married in Nachal Oz at the pool of the kibbutz, a small Israeli wedding with 400 guests, officiated by Rabbi Meir Azari of the Reform Movement in Israel, a dear friend. and a leader, something we are missing in this country these days. We don't have leaders in Israel today. But Rabbi Azari, as a movement leader, is someone I appreciate deeply. We later lived for 3 years in the United States. I was sent by Haaretz, my newspaper, to be the Washington correspondent. And in 2020, we returned to Nachal Oz. By now, we were parents. We were raising 2 small daughters in this kibbutz. We love the life in Nachal Oz. Anyone who has visited, and I see some people here in the audience who had visited me and my family in Nachal Oz over the years, including Rabbi Jacobs. And I have very fond memories of the last time that he came over. But it's a beautiful place. It's serene, it's green, open spaces, and the community is the most important part of it. My girls love the life of the kibbutz. They love their kindergarten. They love going to see the cows and going to the pool in the summer. And over the years, we also dealt with difficult situations. There were mortar attacks and rocket attacks. There is no Iron Dome in Nachal Oz. It's too close to the border. There was the whole phenomenon of the incendiary balloons and other elements that were used by Hamas to start fires in our fields. And yet these threats were not enough to change our mind about living in Nachal Oz. Last year, we bought a home in the kibbutz. And in that new and beautiful home, we were sleeping on Saturday morning, when at 6 a.m., my wife, Miri, woke me up and said that there is a whistle. A whistle is what you hear when a mortar is in the air and it's about to land. And I heard it. We ran to what we call the safe room. In every house in the border communities, there is a room that is built of massive concrete that is supposed to withstand direct hits by mortars or rockets. Most families, like we did, turn that room into the children's room so that they can sleep safely if there is an attack. We ran to the safe room and we heard explosions. And I have to say, we were not excited at all. We are used to this. This is something that happens from time to time, and we have a procedure for it. While we are locking ourselves in the safe room, we pack 2 bags with clothes and everything for ourselves and the girls. And we wait for the moment when there is a brief stop. We shove them into the car and we go to somewhere else safer. And so we were in the safe room. Galia, our 3.5-year-old, was sleeping. Carmel, our 1.5-year-old, was sleeping. We were packing and we were waiting. And then something different happened, something that was chilling. We started to hear gunfire. At first, it was a bit distant in the fields outside the kibbutz, which border directly on Gaza. But then it got closer and closer. We could hear now it was from the road into the kibbutz. Now it was from the neighborhood. And then it was outside our window. The gunfire was directly outside our window. And then it was inside the house. They were shooting rounds of ammunition into our home. We did not know if the terrorists were inside the house or just right next to it. We were locked with the girls inside. The electricity fell down. We were checking our phone and we saw that all of our neighbors in the kibbutz are experiencing the same thing. They were hearing gunfire outside their windows. They were hearing shouts in Arabic. I listened and I understand Arabic. I understood what they were saying. It was tactical discussions, where to go, what to do. And we realized that we were alone. When we moved to Nachal Oz, as I said, the biggest fear was the tunnels. The successive Israeli governments, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, invested billions of dollars, I believe some of it also involved US aid, in constructing an underground wall that goes deep, deep, deep into the ground in an attempt to solve this threat of the tunnels so that we could sleep at night. Because I can tell you, we can sleep at night knowing that a mortar could fall on our house. And we can sleep at night knowing that there could be a fire outside our home. But people would not be able to put their kids to sleep at night if they had known that the tunnel threat, which is basically the threat of an infiltration of terrorists into the community, was still alive. And so, as I said, billions of dollars into constructing this underground wall. And in 5 minutes, Hamas brought tractors and SUVs and ran over the border fence. Anyone who knows a bit Israeli military history will immediately think about what we call the Bar-Lev line, which was a line of military fortifications built in Sinai, across from the Suez Canal, that was supposed to create a buffer from the Egyptian military, and that was just run over by the Egyptians as the starting move of the 1973 war. And when we are in the safe room, hearing the gunfire, I thought, this is it. The underground wall is the Bar-Lev line, and we are now on the first day of the Yom Kippur War. The safe room is supposed to be locked from inside. And I can tell you that in many, many homes in our kibbutz, lives were saved because of this. Because in our home, the terrorists never entered. Our home was locked, all the windows were shut, all the curtains were down. They shot a lot of bullets into the house, but they did not manage to enter. In other homes, they managed to enter, and people were locked in the safe room, and the terrorists tried to open the door, shoot at the door, but they could not enter. However, unfortunately, in other homes, I don't know how and why, they were able to kill, injure, and kidnap members of our community. We were barricaded inside. I made 2 phone calls as long as we had cell reception, because at some point cell reception was lost. I made 1 phone call to my friends at Haaretz, Amos Harel and Yaniv Kubovich, the military correspondents. I told them what was happening, and I asked them to talk to anyone they can in the military to send the Air Force. I realized it would take a lot of time to bring ground forces. I asked them to send the Air Force to bomb the neighborhood from the air. And I called my father. My father, Noam Tibon, is a retired military general. He's a friend of the reform movement, if I can say, all of our family. He was in Tel Aviv, and I told him, the terrorists are here. They're outside our door. And he said 2 words. He said, I'm coming. When all of this was happening, my wife and I were asking something incredible and unbelievable from our 2 young daughters. We were asking them to listen to us and to believe us, that they cannot talk right now, that they have to be absolutely quiet and silent. No talking, no crying. They asked if they can go outside to play in the living room. We said no. They asked if they can go eat in the kitchen. We said no. They asked to go to the bathroom. We said no. And they had to put their faith in us, that we were not just insisting with them like parents sometimes do, but that there was a real reason for this. And they put their faith in us. My girls were the heroes of this day. For 10 hours, they were silent in a dark room where they cannot even see their parents, and they did not cry, and they did not shout, and they listened to what we said. And I told myself in my heart, if I'm asking my girls now to put their faith in me and to go against the very nature of being a 1.5-year-old and a 3.5-year-old child, I must put my faith in my father the same way. And if he said that he will come from Tel Aviv, which is an hour and 15, 20-minute drive, I need to believe he will do it. I don't know how we will get here, but I need to believe, just like my girls are now believing me that they need to be quiet, I need to believe my father will come here. For long hours, we heard the fighting. Soldiers, brave soldiers, tried to engage the terrorists. They were outmaneuvered. They were surprised. Our neighbors were riding in the group as long as there was cell reception. The terrorists were in their house trying to break in. My colleagues Amos and Yaniv, who courageously tried to help, told me that I need to understand the severity of the situation. Nahal Oz was one of many scenes of chaos that morning. The Hamas surprised us in a strategic way. They broke into military bases. They broke into Sderot and Ofakim and many kibbutzim along the border. They arrived at the scene of a music festival and slaughtered more than 200 people just there. The worst terror attack in the history of the state of Israel. The magnitude of the failure is impossible to comprehend. And I have to say, after this war will be over and Israel will win, each and every one of the people responsible for this failure, starting with the corrupt Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, will be thrown into the dustbin of history. but this is for tomorrow. Now we are fighting. I understood the severity of the situation, that we are alone. And I prepared to die. I did not think we could be rescued, but the one hope I had was maybe somehow my father at some point will arrive. My parents started driving from Tel Aviv. I learned only many, many hours later what happened to them on this dark day. At first, they arrived in the area of Sderot, and they saw people running barefoot away from the scene of the music festival. They took them in their car toward a safe place outside of the line of fire. They arrived at a nearby community, Kibbutz Mefalsim. My father teamed there with one brave soldier who agreed to come with him to Nachal Oz and try to fight the terrorists in our neighborhood who were entering houses and trying to kill people. The two of them drove toward Nachal Oz. My father had only a pistol. He's retired. He's over 60. And while they are driving, they see ahead of them an Israeli military jeep being ambushed by a Hamas cell and fighting. They stopped the car. They joined the brave soldiers of the Maglan Special Forces unit, and they killed the terrorists. Some soldiers were killed in that ambush. Others were wounded. And my father, now very close to the entrance to Nachal Oz, minutes away, took the wounded soldiers in his jeep and turned around and went back to where my mother was waiting to bring her the wounded soldiers so that their lives could be saved. And then my parents decided to split. My mom took the wounded soldiers in her car, two of them, to a hospital. And my father saw another retired general, Israel Ziv, who is older than my father even. I think he's closer to 70. But he woke up that morning, he put on uniform, and he went down south to try to save people. And my father told him, Israel, I need help. I don't have a car. My wife took the wounded soldiers in my car to the hospital. Please take me to Nachal Oz. I need to go and save my family. I need to go and save other people in that kibbutz. And Israel Ziv, in an act of extreme selflessness, decided to risk his life and drive my father to Nachal Oz on the same road where there was an ambush before, in a regular car. They made it. And in the entrance to the kibbutz, my father saw a group of soldiers from the special forces. They recognized him. They knew he was a former general. He had a gun by now. One of the wounded heroes gave him his gun and his helmet. And they started to go from home to home in the kibbutz to engage the terrorists and to free the people who were sitting in the safe rooms for now. It was 7, 8, 9 hours. We had no idea this was happening. At this point, we had no cell phone reception anymore. We're just sitting in the dark and waiting. And we started to hear the intense gunfire and the exchange of fire from different kinds of weapons. You could hear the noises. And that's when I told Miri, my brave wife, that my father is coming. He's in the kibbutz now. They were going from house to house with this incredibly courageous group of Maglan soldiers. They killed 6 terrorists at least. They freed people from the kibbutz. Some people were sending me text messages that my father is there, but I could not see it because we had no phone at this point. The last hour in the safe room was the most difficult. The girls had fallen asleep and then they woke up. And by then it was very dark. The little tiny bit of light that had come in through a crack in one of the walls was no longer there. And the girls, they had not ate anything since last night. We only had water with us. And they really wanted to get out. And the only thing I could tell them that kept them behaving and quiet was Saba Baderech, grandfather is coming. They listened and we waited and we heard the gunfire and we prayed for all our neighbors. And at 4 p.m. after 10 hours, we heard a large bang on the window of the safe room. And we heard my father's voice, and Galia, my 3.5-year-old, said, Saba Egia, grandfather is here. This is when we cried for the first time. Our home became the temporary headquarters, if you want to call it, of this brave group of special forces soldiers. They brought everyone there. They brought neighbors who were injured. They brought neighbors who could no longer stay in their homes because their doors were broken. They brought old people who did not want to stay alone anymore after 10 hours alone in the dark. It was a very happy moment to see everyone, to give them hugs, to realize he is alive, she's alive. But it was also a terrible moment because we started hearing about the people who are not alive, those who were killed, those who were missing, those who were injured, those who were kidnapped. In the middle of the night, a bus arrived and took us away towards safety. And now we are in Tel Aviv with my family, and most of the kibbutz is in kibbutz Mishmar HaEmek in the valley, in the Jezreel Valley, who is hosting us. I am in total admiration of the heroes who saved us, of my father and my mother who saved so many people, of my daughters. And I have to say at the same time, I am in complete shock over what happened to our country and to our community. The most important issue right now is the people who are kidnapped in Gaza. There has to be an absolute international demand, not for Hamas to be responsible for their fate or diplomatic jargon of this kind that I know as a diplomatic reporter. The demand has to be their immediate release. These are civilians, these are citizens, there are many women there, children, elderly people, Holocaust survivors. This is incredibly important. I spoke today before a group of ambassadors from the UN Human Rights Council, and I told them, please, your governments should not say Hamas is held responsible. Your governments should say, release these people now. And I want to commend one of the only leaders in Israeli politics today, Mansour Abbas, the leader of the United Arab List Party, who put out a statement in Arabic and in Hebrew this evening, saying that holding women and children captive and sick and elderly people captive is against the laws of Islam, and that Hamas must release them immediately. This is the most important issue. We have to win this war, and it will take a terrible toll from the people of Gaza. I want to prepare everyone for this, because this will not be easy. But the toll that the people of Gaza will pay for the crimes of Hamas will be heartbreaking and unavoidable at the same time. No country in the world can accept a situation in which 700 people are slaughtered in one day, more than 100 are kidnapped. This is a different situation than anything we've experienced before. And if Hamas is not destroyed at the end of this war, an entire region in Israel will not be inhabited again. People will not put their kids to sleep in the safe rooms again if they don't know that the equation has changed and that this threat has not been minimized or hurt. The threat must be eliminated for our communities to return home and to put our kids to bed in those rooms again. There will also be a very, very difficult day after of rebuilding and renewing the communities. And here the American Jewish community will have a massive role. For many years, the American Jewish community put too much resources and energy in the wrong places, supporting the people in Israel who disrespect American Jews, the people in Israel who are responsible for this tragedy, let's be honest. Now there will be an opportunity to support these communities on the border and rebuild them from this disaster. And as I said earlier, we will also have to get rid of the people responsible for this tragedy, the corrupt and dysfunctional government that is leading us, in brackets. But that is the conversation of tomorrow. Today, we need to win the war. We need the world to support us, especially on the issue of the kidnapped people, and we need to plan how to rebuild our home and community so that one day we can again put our daughters to sleep in the room in Nachal Oz and know that they are safe. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think I'm not the only one with a few tears in my eyes right now. Thank you for sharing this really powerful and personal story. It's really stories like yours that allow those of us around the world who are watching the war only unfold on the news to get a glimpse of what these news items mean for ordinary families. So thank you so much for the privilege to hear this story. Thank you. I now hand over to Yair Lutzstein, who will help us zoom out a little bit and share with us his perspective on the overall situation in Israel. Thank you, Yair. I think you're still on mute, sorry.
Erev Tov. After we heard Amir's remarkable, moving story, the narrative of his day on Saturday, it's hard to continue with other things. And these are very, very difficult days for us here in Israel. Unfathomably difficult days. Amir mentioned the terrible intelligence failures, the terrible operational failures, having soldiers arrive in some of these communities 9-10 hours after things got out of hand. But those are things, as Amir mentioned, are things that we will have to deal with moving forward. The numbers tonight have been updated, and now there's at least 900 dead, 2,600 children. When I say 900 dead, it's children, adults, women, elderly, civilians, soldiers. Unfathomable. 2,600 are in hospitals, several hundred of them severely wounded. As Amir mentioned, 130, that's what Hamas and Jihad, Islamic Jihad say, were kidnapped or taken prisoner. They're in Gaza. And those people include, as Amir said, women and children, elderly. It's just heartbreaking and it's unfathomable. Since Saturday, 300,000 reservists have been mobilized. There are issues about that mobilization. Military commanders say today that anyone who will go into action will have full battle gear. There's questions about that they will be well fed. There's questions about that, and it's important to understand it. As Amir mentioned, this is not another round of hostilities. This is not another operation like we had in the past, the most recent one in 2014. This is war. We are being told that we are going into a lengthy war. This will not be a war that will be ended within weeks, within a week or 10 days. We're being told to prepare for many casualties on our sides as well. We all have family members who are being called up, and we all are trepidatious before that ground assault begins, knowing that there will be a very heavy price. This will not be a short battle. The kibbutzim will have to be rebuilt, some of them. They will have to be rebuilt physically, and they will have to be rebuilt emotionally. Again, the news I heard an hour ago is in a kibbutz like Kibbutz Be'eri that had 1,000 residents. Over 100 are dead. 10% of the community is dead. Their bodies found in. It'll take time to rebuild those communities. And I want to commend Amir for mentioning the need for support from Jews, and not only Jews around the world, to help rebuild those communities. And that will be a remarkable achievement that will bring people back to that wonderful paradise, as he mentioned. We're also preparing for a second front. And today there was the first hostilities between ourselves and the Lebanese. Our Air Force attacked in southern Lebanon after shooting of missiles into the Galil, into the Galilee. 4 combatants, terrorists from Lebanon infiltrated into our border, 3 of whom were killed Another one disappeared, apparently back to Lebanon. We're preparing for that. Settlements in the north, on the fence in the north, have been evacuated. Settlements that you know, Rosh Nikra has been evacuated. I'm not telling any military secrets. This is all from the news. And there is a possibility that we will have that second front. Therefore, the 300,000 soldiers that have been mobilized. Today was a particularly difficult day for me. In many senses, for our movement. Our first casualty, Lieutenant Yanai Kaminka, the son of members of our synagogue in Sur Hadassah, a place not far from Jerusalem, was killed. He was an officer in the home front search and rescue team. The service was run for the first time from my point of view that I've ever seen it by a Reform rabbi, David Azulai. There were 1,000 people there. It broke my heart to hear the eulogies of his grandmother, this wonderful family, incredible family, his 3 brothers and sisters, childhood friends, people who served alongside him, people who were his soldiers who couldn't stop crying because they thought about what kind of a commander he was. His parents also spoke, and as his father began to speak, and there was not a dry eye throughout the entire funeral, sirens went off, and we had to run for cover while the funeral was going on. We were told to lay cover on the ground. There's nowhere to take cover, to lay on the ground and cover our heads. And 1,000 people did that. And when we finally got up, we listened again to his father's remarkable eulogy. I don't know if you can say on the upside of things, the level of volunteerism. People, I mentioned 300,000 people being called up. Everyone, just about everyone who's been called up has arrived at his unit. 100% shows up. Folks showing up. Civil society is mobilized. Volunteers are everywhere. People who want to help. In Tel Aviv yesterday, Eritrean refugees helped prepare packages for soldiers in the Southern Front. And our communities are looking for the spiritual support of our rabbis. You heard Yael. Last night we had a call with over 150 of our members across the country of presidents of our community and rabbis. It was a very, very somber evening. But we will overcome this. There's no choice. This is a battle that must be won, and it will be won, and the price will be heavy. It will be heavy for us, and it will be heavy for the Palestinians in Gaza. And I hope that it is as short as possible. The support that we receive from friends and supporters like yourselves around the world means a lot to us. To see the pictures of the Parliament of Canada, the Brandenburg Gate, London, Sofia, and other places around the world, it's very heartwarming to know that we're not alone. We need that support. We need that hug. Phone relatives in Israel. Phone friends in Israel. Don't only send emails. It's hard to answer emails today. Take the 5 minutes to phone your friends, your relatives, people you know through the work that you've done as twin communities. It is so important to us to know that people care about what's happening here abroad. Chaverim, thank you for being here with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Yair. Thank you for sharing those really important reflections with us. And thank you for also giving us a few suggestions of practical things to do. I know many people in the questions are asking what they can do to help. We will be sharing some information in the chat about fundraising campaigns, particularly for North America. But we will also in the follow-up email be able to circulate some more information. Thank you again. We now turn to Yaron Shavit, the Deputy Chairman of the Jewish Agency for Israel, to share with us a brief update about the work of the Jewish Agency for Israel. Thank you, Yaron.
Shalom, Chaverim. When the Yom Kippur War broke, I was a high school student. Today, just before this call, this webinar, I managed to quickly drive from Ivasera to Ramat HaSharon to give a hug to a very good friend, dear friend and comrade in arms, who's my deputy of the division command, where I was the chief of staff during the Second Lebanon War. As I just heard, he lost his son earlier this morning in Gaza. So I managed to go give him a hug and return quickly home. And in the army, we say that war is the kingdom of uncertainty. There's no other way to describe war, because it's all about uncertainty. But as someone who was very much involved and knew from very close the uncertainty and the balagan of the Second Lebanon War, unfortunately, what we are facing today is not even close to the uncertainty that we needed to deal with then. We didn't have our borderline crossed, our villages and kibbutzim vandalized and brutally murdered, and the border crossed. And as someone described to me this morning, it's like we had a pogrom inside of Israel while we are actually ruling the land. So I'll share with you a bit about what we do in the Jewish Agency. I'm there on your behalf, sent by Artzenu to the position of the Deputy Chair of the Jewish Agency. And with that, with the leadership of the Jewish Agency, we have twice a day Zoom calls to balance, to check out on how we're doing. The first few hours were about our own people and staff. I'll share with you one story. I phoned on early, so no, it was late Saturday night. I phoned an employee of the Jewish Agency who works in Ofakim as one of the P2G Partnerships Together heads. And I was supposed to visit her on Sunday. It was obvious that we're not going to come there. I sent an email saying that I'm canceling that, but I wanted to make sure she receives that. And she's telling me, you're actually taking this call from an ambulance. She's 9 months pregnant. She was on her way in labor to the hospital. But then she tells me that she's going to meet her husband there because he's hospitalized and he's under sedation. And he's one of the people that we prayed for good health during the prayers last night. I hope that he makes it. He's still unconscious. And she's still waiting to give birth. This morning I had a call with, again, I'll try not to mention names, with a good friend from Kfar Aza. She's at the moment abroad, but her entire family is there. Half of the kibbutz is gone, is slaughtered. And I'm asking her, okay, tell me what I can do to help them. And she shouts at me, Yaron, they need money. They have nothing. They have nothing they have the clothes that that they went out with the mamad with no phones, no computers, no underwear, nothing. They need money. So quickly I managed to arrange that the Jewish Agency Victims of Terror Fund will get in touch with them. This is something that the Jewish Agency does, just gives hands-on $1,000 to each victim of terror for immediate needs that they have, and that's what they needed with these first moments. So what the Jewish Agency does at this point, after we've sort of managed to stabilize our own institution within this instability of uncertainty around us, is to increase heavily, largely, this fund, because suddenly we have to take care of many hundreds and thousands of more people that actually are looking out for this money. So you might have seen that there was a call for raising that. And Nitzan, who is my special assistant, also from the Reform Movement, working with me at the Jewish Agency, and myself are working with the actually 22 different towns and kibbutzim and moshavim around the Gaza area, and we have mapped all their needs through their mayors and their chief executives to make sure that we try to make good for whatever immediate relief they need, either by our own means and by fundraising through the Jewish Federations of North America. So that's another thing that we're doing. I'll end again with tying it to the Second Lebanon War. When we ended that dreadful war in itself, the division commander, when he said goodbye to the Miluim people, because this is a regular unit, said, you know, the Six-Day War ended up as a huge victory, but look how it looks today. Maybe it wasn't such a great victory. That was in 2006. Maybe this war that in 2006 doesn't look so great, in years to come will be something that is more favorable, more optimistically looked at, and indeed he was right in that, for that matter. So maybe again, this war that started so awfully will end when we look at it from years in the future. Looking back at it, it'll look at something that had made an positive change in Israel and in the Middle East. So thank you.
Thank you, Yaron, for adding your reflections. In a moment, we'll be taking some time for your questions. So please do put them in the chat. But before we get to our Q&A section, it's my privilege to hand over to Rabbi Rick Jacobs.
Thank you. I, like everyone on this call, have been tremendously moved, and I can only imagine listening to Rabbi Vorgan and Amir Tibon in particular, that in 50, 100, and 500 years, when we, on Yom Kippur afternoon, do our Avodah service and tell the story of the Jewish people and heroics and the El Eskara, these things we remember, these stories, this courage will be recounted, and it will fortify us on the journey ahead in Jewish history. But this is the moment we feel such a weight of pain. Let's remember the 700 people who were murdered on Shabbat, the end of our Chag. More people died, more Jews died on this past Saturday than have died on one day since the Shoah, since the Holocaust. The weight of that is enormous. And as you heard from Yair, the numbers continue to grow. It was about a week and a half ago, a number of us met in New York City with Prime Minister Netanyahu, who was here speaking at the UN. And I had a chance to ask him directly. I said, I have some good news to share, Mr. Prime Minister, that in every one of our Reform congregations over the holiday of Rosh Hashanah and in the coming hours of Yom Kippur, there are strong sermons that our people have heard about how much we love the state of Israel, how important Israel is to us, how we stand up and defend her against all external, but also the internal threats. I said, now here's the hard part. I said, take a deep breath. And we are very distraught about the undermining of Israel's independent judiciary and its Supreme Court and its rule of law. I tell you that today because the very same people who have been protesting are at this moment standing shoulder to shoulder together, because this is a moment that demands that we don't put aside politics, but we transcend and realize that the Jewish people are crying out to us. They need us to strengthen in every way humanly possible, to be reaching out to our elected officials here in the United States or Canada, to be contributing funds, to be making sure that our neighbors are understanding what's happened in this coming week when the ground war, as we imagine, in Gaza will heat up, and social media and all media will turn its attention from understanding and sympathizing with the Israelis and the Israeli pain of this past weekend. Things are going to shift. We're going to be needed in that campaign for hearts and minds. And I know that all of us will be not only ready, but willing. One story about being at Kibbutz Nachal Oz, listening to Rabbi Vorgan and sitting with Amir Tibon and his parents, particularly his dad, who's just an incredible person. I was sitting there after the service, after Kabbalat Shabbat, and a woman from the kibbutz came up to me and said, I need to talk to you. So I'm a rabbi, so I know someone's unhappy. It's not an unusual thing. People are unhappy all the time. So I said, of course, what can I say? She said, I have lived here my life. I've raised my children here, and now my grandchildren live here in Nachal Oz. She said, and I'm really angry. I said, what are you angry about? She said, do you know the pain? This is right after the May 2021 rocket attacks on Israel, and particularly on the Gaza border. These were communities and kilot that were devastated, and yet they also had this incredible strength. And the grandmother said, I can't stop thinking, as we sat in the bomb shelters for the last 3 weeks, all I could think about were the grandmothers and the children and the grandchildren across the border in Gaza that didn't have shelters to seek shelter in. And I thought to myself, I don't know how human beings can hold that much of concern for your own family and your own community, but also to be able to extend that to the innocents all around. Friends, I would just conclude by saying this week's Parshat Bereshit, one word, the simplest question that we're asked right now, Ayeka. Where are you? Where are we? We're here listening to these incredible leaders tell us about this moment, but we're not watching. We're not listening so that we can sort of, cheer and hope that our people come through. We are summoned. Ayeka, where are each of us? Now, we've asked people to contribute to the Jewish Federation of North America's campaign. It's an umbrella campaign for the Jewish community. The reason is very simple. We're part of something larger. We're the Reform movement. We're the largest, most diverse movement here in North America, and globally we have enormous strength. And we're part of the Jewish people. So we've asked people to contribute generously to this campaign, and we will be part of the allocations and be able to make sure that the institutions that we love and that serve our communities, that they will also be the beneficiaries of this campaign. But we need to contribute also so to make sure that all those who will be in the aftermath of this horrific assault will be able to recover their lives, their strength, and all that is important. So please, we need that generosity. And the Ayeka is for all of us today. Where are we? Will we stand strong? We continue to be there in ways that are needed, in ways that we're not yet even sure how they'll be needed. This is a moment for us to express our leadership. So I look forward to the questions and answers, and a chance for us to take these lessons into our leadership as we go forward.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to invite all our speakers to join us on the spotlight for a moment. I can see Anna came on first. Our wonderful tech team put Anna and then Rabbi Yael Wogan on first, which is fantastic, because I think the first question I'm going to take is one that probably the two of you, and we don't have so much time, so I'm not going to give every panelist a chance to answer every question. But I think maybe the two of you can speak to this question by Laurie Resnick, who is talking about really asking a practicality. Are there enough rabbis around to officiate at these many funerals? And how are they able to be held in this horrible scenario? So I just want to extend that. Maybe Anna, you can speak to that as the head of the movement, and maybe Yael as one of those rabbis. Maybe you can speak to the question, how are you being held in this horrible scenario?
Yeah,
Anna.
so I keep asking myself the same question because right now we still don't have all the names of the people who were killed, and there are funerals that are starting to occur, but there are many that the army is not releasing the dead or others. But one thing that we do know is that we will have many people turn to us, and we're here. And even though there are rarely non-Orthodox cemeteries in Israel, in many of the cemeteries, there is a possibility for our rabbis to conduct funerals, and I think that specifically in Sha'ar HaNegev, this one rabbi will not be able to do it on our own, and will have other colleagues join, and as much as Yael, Rabbi Yael would need. We just provided current resources of grievance and whatever is needed. First of all, for our rabbis, and also online for families who will be seeking that on our website. And obviously it is going to be very a heavy burden, but a burden that our spiritual leaders will take on with a lot of love and with strength, and our movement will stand behind them, and we'll do whatever we can to provide that. And I'm sure, Yael, you can talk about your experience in being a rabbi in Sha'ar HaNegev and conducting funerals, not just the time of war, but in general. So, b'vakasha, Yael.
Thank you, Anna, and I really have to thank all the Israel Reform Movement for giving me so much support and help in the last few days. So many suggestions and information is going through, and people are really offering everything they can give and be with us. The kibbutzim in Sha'ar HaNegev have their own cemeteries. They're like independent cemeteries. They do burials by themselves. They do not, almost never invite the Orthodox Chevra Kadisha to do anything in their cemeteries. So sometimes they do it independently. Sometimes they invite me to officiate. As I told you before, the only thing is I can promise I will try as much as I can to just be there for every person who will ask me to be there, even if I'm not officiating the ceremony. I know that my rabbis' friends and colleagues will be there if I'll ask them, and I really think that the question is the day after we finish burying all these people, how are we going to plan, as Amir said, the rebuilding of the communities. That's what I'm thinking about, although we're not there yet. But I kind of, it's so hard to think about these funerals that I kind of start moving on with my thoughts, but there's still time for that. So I will do my best to be there for everyone who will ask me to, and I have a lot of confidence in the movement to be there with me. So thank you.
Thank you, Yael. We've had quite a number of questions around security questions, of course, in the chat. I think I'm going to turn this one to Yair and Yaron, partly in their current roles, but also with their many, many years of experience in the military themselves. If you could maybe just say a few more words around the question of the intelligence failure. Was it a cyber attack? Is that what is currently being talked about? What might be Hamas's end game? And also maybe Yair can take that part, and then maybe Yaron can say a few words about what is the general feeling amongst people. Is there anger at the failure that seems to have led to what we have witnessed? So maybe I'll turn to Yair first and then to Yaron.
So I'll try to deal with a couple of these questions. The Iron Dome, first of all, I think Amir alluded to it, but the Iron Dome doesn't work on communities that are on the fence. It only works with communities that are a bit further back. And so, yes, the Iron Dome works. That's why when I was at the funeral today, the Iron Dome took out some of the missiles coming in, missed a couple, and people were injured in a community nearby. We heard the explosion in ultra-Orthodox community and in Jerusalem, because they were on their way to Jerusalem. But the Iron Dome does exist. It's a miracle because it catches roughly 95% of the missiles coming in. Was intelligence hacked? We don't know. But I know that there are places where one of the questions that is being asked is how could the terrorists find their way through the fence into Israel and come through with these vehicles and motorcycles? And this is not a regular fence. This is what we call an indicative fence. Someone touches it, it shows up in a room with soldiers are supposed to immediately report it. Why didn't that report go up the chain of command? And we're starting to hear some terrible things about why that happened, perhaps, and how they managed to get into a place where that change of command, that reporting was supposed to be happening, and many soldiers were killed within that base. They managed to get to that base earlier. Some of them got in with gliders. They came over the fence and were not found. And that's another security lapse. Iran, I saw a question about Iran. We're all certain, it's not even questionable that Iran has been training both Hamas and Hezbollah. They're behind them. They're providing them with equipment. We try to do our best and say this is not a reform question. This is an Israeli military question. We try to thwart that supply line, but it doesn't always work. And we can see that they were very well trained. I think that we were surprised at how well they were trained and what they were doing. They fought valiantly, as much as you can say that about their side of things, and that's why there were so many losses. They also fought in a way that, as someone who is an international lawyer who dealt with the laws of war in their military career, I can say that they certainly committed heinous war crimes in doing what they had to do, what they felt they had to do, and something that they are not often held accountable for. And we have to understand that we are forever being held to a double standard. And I'm not saying Israel should not act in a manner that goes to some of the other questions that were asked moving forward in the list of questions. Israel, as a rule, acts according to the IDF under the rules of the laws of war. The war that's coming up is going to be a difficult one, and some of those questions will arise as we move forward. I'll leave. Let me just give one other piece, and it goes back to what Anna and Yael spoke about. Why aren't there so? Why is the rate of funerals so low? So there's some issue at this party that Amir described, this nature party that took place on Friday night. There were upwards of 3,000 to 4,000 young people who came to the party to have fun. Not everyone goes for Simchat Torah. They wanted to have a different type of simcha, a different type of fun. And there's talk about the possibility of upwards of 250 of the people that were there that were killed at that party. And there's the need for forensics to get to the identity of these people, and that takes time. So I think our rabbis, not only our rabbis, are going to have their hands full for several weeks on this. Their own anger.
Okay, so from my perspective, I'll add the following. First, I'd be very, very careful in hanging into different conceptions at this point. I will share with you that following the Second Lebanon War, I had 180 Miluim days consistent, but more than half of them were because I was a member of a research team that was given a mission to research one of the angles of what went wrong during that specific war. And only after you research deeply into things, you can actually come into conclusions. So I'd be very careful into jumping into conclusions about what happened and how it happened. I would share what I think we can say from high altitude is very much like Yom Kippur. This is a failure of a conception. The IDF is always very much dependent on given some kind of a wake-up call beforehand from the intelligence, from other sources, to be able to mobilize reserves. If we don't mobilize reserves, we are very short in fighting soldiers to actually deal with what's happening at the West Bank at the same moment, and what's happening in the Northern Front, and what's happening in Gaza. If this, from what we already know, this attack was for over 1,000 terrorists at the same time, some of them with gliders, some of them 14 points that they cut on the fence and the entry points, and hitting on the lookout posts of the cameras of the people watching. And once they already knew what's happening, they could actually not mobilize anything. And at the same point, the division command was under attack. So that in itself creates a huge chaos where no one actually mobilizes, moves soldiers from one place to another to stop things from happening. We're actually dealing with this mess till now because there are still terrorists in Israel as we speak, and they're sometimes still coming in, and there's not full control over this area, which we hoped will be take no more than 24 hours, and now we're already 72 hours, and we're still not control over the area. So the feeling is in Israeli society, I think, is a deep feeling of humiliation, of despair, of loss of confidence. This is not strange to more than half the Israeli society losing the confidence in our leadership, but at the moment it's shared by a much wider number of Israelis about the loss of trust. Unfortunately, also the IDF command at this point, and therefore I do believe that, as was mentioned, the need for a unity government at this point to build trust and make sure that we actually have in the political posts also people that we trust, that have some more know-how and ability than Smotrich and Ben-Gvir on the sides of others, will help all of us regain control over the situation and help us sort of turn the table over. So
thank you so much. We had lots more questions, of course, and we're going to try to look through all of the questions and see if in our follow-up emails and communications, we will be able to answer some more of these questions for you. We also, of course, are unfortunately all preparing ourselves for this to not be over very soon. And in all likelihood, we will be reconvening. All of us are going to try to keep you up to date. For those in North America, especially the time zone works better for North America than the rest of the world. That's why I'm mentioning North America particularly. There's also a special gathering later today. Our Hearts Are in the East, a musical event in solidarity with Israel. You will be able to find details of that in the chat and in the comments on our live stream. And if you're on the mailing lists, then details about that will be sent out. I want to thank all of you for your important questions. I want to thank especially our speakers this evening, especially, of course, Rabbi Yael Vogan and Amir Tibon, who had to leave us a little bit earlier, for really bringing the personal to us. Thank you for this opportunity of coming together. Even as we have shared our grief and deep concern, I hope that this time together has reminded us of the power of solidarity and served as a source of comfort as we gather strength for what lies ahead. So as we close today's webinar, we will close with that for which we all yearn, a prayer for peace. So it's my privilege to turn over to Rabbi Hara Person of the CCAR for leading us in a prayer for peace. Thank you, Hara.
Thank you, Leah. We join with all of you in our Reform world, in the broader Jewish community, and all people of good conscience everywhere in standing in solidarity with our Israeli rabbis, with our IMPJ community, our friends and family members, and all the inhabitants of Israel. Heartbroken and horrified, we mourn the lives lost and pray for healing of the wounded. We pray for those defending Israel and for the safe redemption of the captured. I'm going to share words written by Rabbi Mira Regev. Avinu shebashamayim, Shechina makor chayenu, tzor Yisrael v'goalo. Our parent in heaven, Shechina, source of life, rock and redeemer of Israel, strengthen and deliver all who stand on guard, protecting their homes. Safeguard and save them from any trouble and distress, and bless their actions. Hear their prayers and ours, and deliver them. Save those who are trapped in their homes. Grant them inner strength, faith, and hope. Bolster them in these terrifying times. Send your mercy to the anxious mothers and hurting fathers and the children sitting in shelters. May it be your will to remember us, to take notice of us, to meet us with compassion, for we trust in you. Return all those kidnapped safe and sound to their homes, without the spilling of innocent blood, without their souls becoming tarnished by horrific acts. Strengthen those who protect our holy land, soldiers and civilians alike. We pray, nation shall not lift up sword against nation, and they will study war no more. Compassionate God, please, arouse your mercy for us, and may the verse be fulfilled. From the seed of peace, the vine shall produce its fruit, the land shall produce its yield, and the skies shall provide their moisture. I will bestow all these things upon you, and you shall be a blessing. Have no fear. And let us say together, Amen.
Amen.
May it be so. Thank you.